The opinions expressed on the program you are watching are not necessarily those of Shaw Cable Systems or of the station. Through our access policy, we provide the opportunity for community groups and individuals to express their points of view.
The Road Trip is driven by your neighborhood Cooper Medallion tire dealers. More than 40 Manitoba locations. Online at coopertire.com. Hi, I'm Michael Clark. You know, normally when we do our shows down here at the Blue Ocean Auto Detailing Studio, you expect 4 wheels under whatever it is that we're going to be testing. So we're not talking about a Hummer H3, and we're not talking about a Toyota RAV4 or even that Hotshot Sierra over there. We're talking about bikes. Now, this is the 2012 Honda CBR 250 RA. Now that A is really important. That's because this particular bike has combined ABS. Now you're probably saying to yourself, well, Mike, I thought this show was only about cars. Well, let me give you a little bit of background. 2006, I decided it was time to get my proper license for riding a motorcycle. And like most of us, I cut quite a bit of knees and other important parts of my skin on dirt bikes growing up as a kid. But I wanted to make sure that I had proper training before I decided to go up in a big way on 2 wheels. Now, I've had different bikes over the years, and one of the things that I noticed is that when you're looking for your first bike, you tend to find quite a few around, in and around the $1,500 to $2,000 mark. And that usually means that that bike has a safety. The only thing about it is that bike is sometimes 25 to 30 years old, and you're dealing with some technology that quite honestly is getting a little hard to maintain, much like a 30-year-old car. So the reason I wanted to get something like this for testing is to show people that getting into a brand new bike is really not that expensive. A lot of people assume, especially if you're going for some different brands such as Harley Davidson and such, that it's a $15,000 to $20,000 proposition. Not so. With something like this here, this particular Honda, you can actually get into this bike with the ABS for under $5,000, brand new. They even throw in a full tank of gas with it. But the big thing that you have to remember when you're first starting to ride is you may want to think about the weight of the bike. Now, this particular Honda, 366 pounds dry. When you start taking a look at some of the other bikes out there, they start to fatten up in a hurry. Say Harley Davidson Sportsters, even a Triumph Bonneville is 495 pounds. So keep that in mind, especially when you're looking at your first bike. The other thing you have to remember is that in Manitoba, it's not just as simple as it used to be. Instead of just getting up on your beginner's license and passing the written test and hopping on a bike, those days are gone. You have to actually take an advanced safety course. And there is both an 8-hour and a 21-hour, and I'll be the first to tell you, take the 21-hour. We're going to get into some of the additional features on this particular Honda today, plus we're going to talk a little bit about proper riding gear, as well as the insurance question. Is it really that expensive to insure a motorcycle in Manitoba? But first, I think it's time for a retro Honda motorcycle moment.
Through rain or sleet or snow, you gotta get up and go. When the going's tough and you're hitting the rough, there's something that you ought to know. Good things happen on a Honda. You can go wherever you please, because good things happen on a Honda. Let them happen to you. Let them happen to you. Let them happen to you. You let it ruin your day. Just sing a song as you go along. It's all gonna be okay. Good things happen on a Honda. Let them happen to you.
Why does Honda build 45 different motorcycles?
CB900F. Does the F stand for fast?
I want a lot of bike.
But
I don't have a lot of money. Honda builds more, so you get more of a choice. But hurry, the sooner you get here, the more choice you get.
I need to take a trip.
Leon! Father's a leader.
A long trip.
He's on a Honda.
You know, they say you meet the nicest people on a Honda. And what you also tend to meet when you get on top of one of these Honda motorcycles is performance. Now, what I like about this particular CBR 250RA is that we are dealing with such a low displacement with an engine that quite honestly feels like it's a lot more. Now I'll explain some of the technology that you get here. Now first off, this is a single thumper, as we like to say, single cylinder engine. You would normally expect for a 250 on some other motorcycles to have a V or a parallel twin. Not so here. What we've got is the single cylinder engine, which also has, hang on to this, twin camshafts, and it's also a 4-valve engine. So that's pretty impressive for this type of displacement. You've also got the Honda programmed fuel injection system, so you don't have to worry about looking for your little drain cock in respect to turning the fuel on. It's simply not here. And the other thing that you get too is a 6-speed transmission with this particular Honda. So the good thing is having that 6-speed really helps in respect to getting proper highway velocities. And you'd be surprised at how well this performs on the highway. Well, one of the reasons has to do, of course, with cheating the wind. Now, the CBR 250RA actually has fairings that are, well, pretty much associated with what you would normally see on a Honda VFR 1200. And let me tell you something, when you're humming along at about 110, 115 kilometers an hour on the highway, you want to do everything you can to cheat that wind. Now, for an entry-level bike, the last thing that I was going to be expecting was a lot in the way of instrumentation. Now, as with most sportish bikes such as these, you would expect that the tachometer is going to be front and center. We're not disappointed here. I mean, especially since we're also looking at a 10,500 RPM red line, so we definitely want to know exactly where we are in the revs. But the one thing that really struck me when I first got on this CBR 250RA was the amount of additional instrumentation. Now, for example, most of the older bikes that you're going to be riding, you don't have a fuel gauge. I mean, the idea of having a fuel gauge on a bike seems, well, kind of non-bike. But you don't have to pop the cap off and shake it around anymore, because what you've actually got here, and I'll turn the bike on so you can actually see, you've got a fuel gauge on this thing. And that's really impressive. Now, you've also got the digital speedometer as well as a clock. You even know what time it is, plus the odometer as well as trip meter. I wanted to point out, of course, that it does have a temperature gauge. Now, this particular single thumper, talk about unexpected for this price point. You're actually getting liquid cooling with this 249cc engine. So, I mean, that's definitely something we expect up in the VFR 1200 range. Now, as for the rest of the controls here, pretty much what you expect. You've got, of course, your turn signals, which still, of course, as most motorcycles have, you do have to take care of canceling them on your own. You, of course, have the horn itself. And other than that, everything else here is pretty much classic motorcycle. There's really nothing out of the realm of understanding here whatsoever. The one thing I do find when riding it, though, because this is actually classified as a sports standard bike. So one thing you're going to notice is that you don't have particularly wide handlebars, and sometimes I find I like to have a little bit wider bar just to really be able to use the counter steering effect, especially in the corners. But it's, you know, by no means unsafe. It's just something that you kind of have to get used to. Take a look again at the instrumentation, and you'll notice that there's the yellow glowing ABS light. That's right, you've actually got combined ABS on this bike, and it works, of course, the same as actuating the brakes that you normally would. I mean, you still have to even it out with front and rear, so it's not just some magical panic situation, slam on the front brake and hope for the best. You still have to brake the same way that you would on a motorcycle. Well, let me tell you something. With that ABS, especially in slow-moving traffic, and especially with the fact that nobody's really paying attention to you on a bike, you're going to really appreciate having it. In fact, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety has done some recent studies on bikes equipped with ABS. Now, we normally expect to hear about these types of features on bikes such as BMW, but For this particular bike, for under $5,000, it's the only bike in that class that has some form of ABS. And let me tell you something, especially being a new rider or a newish rider, you definitely want to have that type of stopping power very much at hand. Now, the way that the CBR 250R range works today for 2012 is there's actually two bikes. So make sure if you're doing your shop that you're aware of this, because there is the combined ABS version, which is the road trip tester, as well there is the CBR 250R that doesn't have the ABS. So you save about $500 to go that particular route. Now, not to worry, because you're really not getting cheated in the braking department. Taking a look up front here, you've actually got a 3-piston caliper on the ventilated disc, and you've got a single piston caliper on the rear disc. Now, remember too that we're dealing with, of course, a chain-driven motorcycle, so you do have to, of course, tighten your chain periodically. But the one thing that's really cool about this particular Honda is that the service intervals, because of the fuel-injected engines, well, let me tell you something, they're not anything like the adjustments that you normally had to do to your valves and such in the days of old. In fact, the service interval on this engine is 48,000 kilometers. And for a lot of people, it's probably going to take them about 4 or 5 years of riding to even get to those types of numbers. So the good news is that even after the factory warranty is done on the bike, which is only 1 year, you're probably not going to be dealing with a whole lot of serious maintenance issues as the years go by riding. Now, you can of course get in a couple different color combinations. Personally, I like the old red, white, and blue combination. Unfortunately, not available on this particular CBR 250RA. Now, what I do like is that you actually can bring a passenger. Now, if you take a look at the way that this bike is configured, not only do you have the pegs and, of course, a little bit higher up riding position, but you've also got the handles back here for holding on to, which have been designed for you to be using proper riding gloves, which is what you should always be wearing when you're on a bike as a rider as well as a passenger. We're going to get into what types of riding equipment that you should be wearing. But you know, I wanted to point out too that there's actually a pretty handy little compartment that's underneath the seat on this particular Honda, and holds, of course, well, in our case, the registration for this particular bike, as well as the slight tool kit for adjustments on the go. And of course, it locks up quite nicely. There's also the ability to get the aftermarket hook, so you can also lock your helmet to the bike when not in use. And other than that, we're surprised that it even has storage at all, and the fact that it's also really easy to get to. Simply just put that back in and give it a good smack. Locked in place. Now, I've got some stats here that are very interesting when it comes down to insurance. Now, a lot of people, of course, have been concerned the fact that Manitoba's motorcycle insurance rates seem to be pretty high. And yes, that definitely is true when compared to other jurisdictions. I mean, for example, Saskatchewan pays a lot less than we do, and of course, areas in the States. I just got back from Hawaii a few months back, and for, well, basically anything in the realm of 1200 cc for Harley Davidsons, you'd be lucky to punch $400 a year. Of course, they also like to wear flip-flops and tank tops, and we're going to get into why that's a really bad idea on a bike. But let's talk about what this particular Honda CBR 250R is going to run you. Now, I did as a comparison my record, which is a 28% discount, and worked it out. Now, the interesting thing is that it's really not that expensive. For the entire year, which is including your registration costs, you're looking at $1,128 to insure this particular Honda. Now, remember that you pay during the riding season, so your monthly payments can be a little bit inflated or seem inflated. So you're looking at about $226 a month during the riding season. Makes sense to, of course, pay it all in one shot. But what I was also curious about is when you go up in the displacement of the engine, what are you going to be paying extra? Now, the interesting thing is that for going for some much bigger bikes, say a Harley Davidson V 883 cubic inch. Now, if we get into something like a Sportster, you'd be surprised at actually how economical something like that is, because a Sportster, and this is of course the super low, so that's the new style, which definitely gives it a good riding height for new riders. You're actually looking at $1,230 a year for that, and the same is said for something a little bit more retro. If you want to go to something like a Triumph Bonneville for 2012, you're going to be paying the same amount of money. So this idea that we've got these gargantuan insurance rates is really starting to disappear. So I give props to MPI for that. It's by no means the cheapest, and I highly doubt we're ever going to see some of those crazy $400 a year rates, unless of course you're riding a scooter. The Road Trip is driven by your neighborhood Cooper Medallion tire dealers. More than 40 Manitoba locations. Online at coopertire.com. Hi, I'm Michael Clark from The Road Trip. You know, it's hard to believe, but there will come a day when this new truck doesn't look so new anymore. Maybe it's got mechanical issues, maybe it's just plain tired. And a lot of people have to ask themselves, what do you do with it that could really make a difference in the life of a child? Well, there actually is a solution, and it's got to do with the Road Trip Cars That Care. Here's how it works. Let's say you've got an unwanted vehicle. It can be a car, it can be a truck, it could even be a boat. All you have to do is call Associated Auto Auction at 895-9790. Tell them that you want to donate your vehicle to the Road Trip Cars That Care in support of the Hunger for Hope program at Winnipeg Harvest. Now, you're probably wondering what Hunger for Hope is about. Well, the smallest victims of hunger, of course, being babies that need the most important nutrition in their developing lives. And that means that they need the proper baby formula to help them develop. So to do that, we actually have to get the funds to make sure that they're able to buy that baby formula. It can't be donated. So this is the way that we do it with unwanted vehicles like this. So call them at 895-9790. Associated Auction will do a free pickup for you, and then you get a tax receipt once that vehicle sells for the actual sale price at the auction. Now, if you've got questions, you can send us an email at honkyourhorn@live.ca. And remember, no child should go to bed hungry. Listen, folks, I know it's hot out. I really know it's hot out. Do you know how I know it's hot out? That's because I wear proper gear when I'm riding a motorcycle. So yes, I know it's hot out. So we're going to talk a little bit about certain things that you need to consider when you're going to be getting some of the most basic gear that of course is going to keep you in good shape if you ever have to put this bike down. Now, the one thing that I'm a really big proponent of is using a proper jacket. Now, this particular Joe Rocket one, this is of course a textile jacket, and I want to show you some of the features on something like this. Not the splattered bugs that I didn't have time to clean off. Now, a lot of people who are riding bikes right now, there is of course unfortunately the flip-flop tank top set that, well, they have to wear of course helmets, that is the law. They tend to think that of course because it's so hot out that they want to be as comfortable as possible. Now, there's a few things that you have to remember when, of course, you're riding with very minimal gear. You actually have to concern yourself with such conditions as hypothermia, because depending on how fast you're going and depending on how much wind is rushing around, you can get a false sense of exactly what the temperature is. In fact, at say about 115 kilometers an hour, if you're not wearing the right gear, even if it's 28 degrees outside, it can start to get pretty cold pretty fast. So consider that. Now, when it comes to these types of jackets, I want to show you some of the elements that occur within them. Now, you've actually got, and you can probably see just a little bit of the formation there, is there's additional padding inside the textile. In fact, if we open it up here, you can see that there is a foam insert inside this jacket, which of course can be removed to clean the jacket. And that of course is to protect your spine in the event of putting the bike down. Now, this also has the ability to put in a cold weather liner. So if you're going to be riding into the late season, you're going to be assured that you're going to be warm enough. Now, there is additional pockets inside the jacket. But I want to caution you on the use of pockets and explain exactly why. The reason that you have to concern yourself with anything that you carry when you're riding a motorcycle is that it can quickly turn into shrapnel when you are in a situation where you have to put this bike down. So things such as car keys, even your cell phone, other items that you normally put into your pockets are really not a good idea to have on your person when you're riding a motorcycle. So for that reason, there's of course the underseat storage that we showed you, a good place to put some of the more common items. But if you got a little bit more going on, something like this particular bag here, I tend to use when I go on longer trips. Now, this particular one has, of course, the magnet pads. So as most tanks are going to be metal construction, very easily attaches to just about any of your metal tanks. So what you do here is that you can basically store all of your items that you need. And what I like about this particular one is that I can actually throw a couple of bottles of water into it, because as you're riding, you want to make sure that you stop every now and then and keep yourself hydrated, because, you know, it's amazing how much sweat runs out your boot when you're wearing proper gear. Now, here's one thing about the textile jackets that you need to know, is that the majority of the good ones out there have the additional vents. So these aren't pockets, these are the vents that allow proper airflow as you're riding the motorcycle on the highway. So you can actually keep yourself very cool, very well controlled in regards to your body temperature, and still be protected. Now, once of course you've got the full jacket on, you also have to make sure you're wearing some boots. So these particular ones, these are my old work boots. I always wear these when I'm riding, and they come up just past the ankle, so good protection there. And there's definitely a lot of people who will recommend that you even wear them higher than that. So again, it's all about protection. Denim, always being wearing something at least in the realm of pants. So shorts, definitely not a good idea. In fact, denim is kind of midway in respect to what you should be wearing. If you're doing a lot of highway riding, you can definitely consider full leathers, which are really a good idea, especially in the event of putting the bike down. Now, in fact, with denim, you're only going to be protected so long, but it also comes down to a budgetary concern for some people, especially automotive journalists. Now, this particular setup that I like to use too, these are some of the best things I've ever bought for riding, and these are a gauntlet style glove. Now, you'll notice that when you put the glove on, and of course you have a jacket on, that you've got full wrist protection, very important. Plus also too, you've got additional stitching on the fingers. So believe me, for a guy who likes to talk with his hands, I want to make sure I still have them in the event of putting the bike down. You've also got these additional knuckle protectors here. So again, if you're scraping on a hard surface, this is going to give you that little bit of insurance and hopefully keep you from getting character building scars anytime soon. Now, the helmet, of course, which is right over here, is something that a lot of people tend to overlook. Now, this particular one I've had custom painted by my good friend Kevin Wilson at Affordable Airbrushing. And notice that if you're getting a helmet painted, it still has to show the DOT markings. Now, this one's getting a little bit on in years, and there's definitely been some advancements in helmets. But one thing I did want to point out is this one has, of course, the air vents on the sides, also has an anti-fog vent up front, and as well as additional cooling on the top of the helmet. Now, what I also like to do is I like to treat my lens with some anti-fog, so definitely keeps it as safe as possible for as long as possible. Make sure, of course, that you've got the padding inside properly set to your head. There is no substitute for a helmet that fits properly, so definitely keep that in mind, and always, always use a full face, because this doesn't do well when you hit the pavement.
And now it's time for Road Trip Trivia.
What was the first Honda motorcycle model sold in North America?
Email your answer to honkyourhorn@live.ca. The winner will receive a deluxe engine shampoo from Blue Ocean Auto and Boat Detailing. A clean engine runs better. Plus, a $50 gift pack of Manitoba Lottery's Scratch to Win tickets.
Now, one of the first things that you want to do before you take your bike out for a ride is you want to do, of course, some obvious checks. Now, one of the things that you need to remember is that you are relying to a very large degree on some very small lights. So the last thing you want to have is one of them out. So one of the first things you want to do before you take the bike out is make sure that all of your lights are working correctly. So check your high beams as well as your signals. Make sure, of course, that they are canceling. And that's always important to remember on a bike because, of course, you have to cancel them. So it's kind of old school that way. Now, on this particular one, doesn't have, of course, a brake light that you're able to easily see. So what I have noticed because of the reflection in the black is I can tell by simply squeezing the front brake whether or not it's working. So the brake light's working good. Also check your rear signals. And as well as the license plate light to make sure that they can come and get you after they find you. No, you would never do that. But once you've checked all that, of course, let's not forget about the horn. So you've checked all of your safety systems. Now, there's some other things that you need to check, even on bikes that, of course, are this brand new. Now, from time to time, because, of course, this is a chain drive, make sure that you check your chain tension. And, of course, if you don't feel that you can adjust it yourself, take it to, of course, a certified dealer, and they can make sure that they do it for you. The other thing you have to, of course, check on a motorcycle is the oil. And with, well, pretty much every modern motorcycle engine, you're going to have a sight glass down below underneath. And all you have to do is simply bring the bike towards you slowly. Obviously, you don't want to drop it on yourself. And make sure that the oil fills the sight window. So we are now ready to ride. But of course, one of the things that you're going to notice too, and a lot of new riders will realize this very quickly, is that modern motorcycles have safety equipment in place to make sure, of course, that you don't go and do anything really bad. Now, one of the most silly things to forget about is putting up your kickstand. In fact, if you actually tried to move the bike with the kickstand down, it will shut down completely. So make sure, of course, that you put your kickstand up. Other things that you need to remember in respect to the bike itself. Now, as much as they like to shine up the tires down at Blue Ocean Auto and Boat Detailing, the one thing they never do is put tire dressing on motorcycle tires, because the very nature of a motorcycle tire is that it's going to be needing traction at all points. So, of course, during cornering, you have to make sure that you've got all face of that tire ready to accept traction. Anything such as a tire cleaner or a tire dressing on a motorcycle tire, really bad idea. So if you like putting on that slobbering goop onto your tires, save it for your Hummer H3. Well, as you can see, there's a few additional items that you have to think about to have for proper riding safety. I wanted to touch again on the full face helmet and draw your attention to something that is actually titled the Hurt Report. Now, it's not, of course, a play on words. It actually has to do with a gentleman by the name of Hurt who did some very serious studies in respect to what type of injuries were occurring, of course, on the human noggin. And the one thing that was discovered is that the majority of the injuries had to do with the chin. So that's why I wear a full face helmet, because let's face it, this isn't exactly getting any prettier. So proper riding gear. The other thing that, of course, I've been taught by a lot of people who have been riding for years is in respect to putting the bike down. Now, those particular scratches there, I didn't put them on the bike. But in the event that you actually have to put the bike down, there's been a couple of different things that have been said in respect to somehow riding the bike as it's on its side. Don't do that. You basically want to get off that bike, push it away from you as fast as possible, and hope that all your gear is going to do the right job. So we're going to be visiting some small Manitoba towns and talking about it on CJOB in respect to roadside attractions. So listen every Saturday from 10 till noon on CJOB 68. And if you've got questions, thoughts, or feelings about anything in respect to cars, as well as maybe thinking about getting up on a motorcycle for the first time, send us an email at honkyourhorn@live.ca. I'm Michael Clark. Keep the shiny side up and the rubber side down.
The Road Trip, is driven by your neighborhood Cooper Medallion tire dealers. More than 40 Manitoba locations. Online at coopertire.com.
The opinions expressed on the program you have just watched are not necessarily those of Shaw Cable Systems or of this station. Through our access policy, we provide the opportunity for community groups and individuals to express their points of view.